It's been 2.5 weeks of Season 9, and after the latest hotfix patch, the meta has finally settled, and I'm here to bring you my personal tier list for ranked play based on my observation on the NA ladder and OWCS, which I've been playing in. Starting with D.Va, a staple in ranked, and is easily A tier, as she's versatile with mobility. The Matrix helps shut down all these like projectile size buffs this season, and all these hit scan heroes have that, of course, and MOIRA orbs. Don't forget about the MOIRA orbs. There's a lot of MOIRAs being played right now, so she's just a great option. Now, DOOMFIST, I honestly thought he was going to be hot trash in the first week of the season, but turns out he was actually buggy before the hotfix patch, which fixed a lot of the punch animations lagging out, the knockdown bug with Brig, along with some of his diagonal punch angles. And now that Zen was slightly nerfed since the hotfix patch and the meta has settled down, Doom has surprisingly jumped up as an A tier pick in high elo, as one of the few tanks that doesn't get absolutely blown up thanks to his block and mobility to quickly run away if things get too dicey. Now you do need someone who's proficient at this hero to get good value though. He's not like an Orisa, which any average schmo could pick up and generate high value with, but DOOMFIST is being played quite a bit in the OWCS as well, and is honestly one of the best tanks to run for dive, even over Winston for the most part. JUNKRAT, also A tier, very good. Queen has risen up to the top as your A tier all-in rush tank for those types of compositions. She's a staple of ours in the OWCS and a ranked menace because she has incredible damage output, decent survivability as long as you manage your natural cover well, and shout when you're actually committing. If you do misplay her though in the open, you will blow up, but the same can be said for most tanks in the game. So yeah, great A tier hero. All right, MAUGA, probably C tier. After the nerfs in Season 8, I think MAUGA has been a pretty mediocre pick and isn't a hero you probably want to start on around, but I will say he's actually okay in some situations like against a Winston or a MAUGA mirror, but the DPS passive has certainly slowed him down, slowed down his dominance as well, since his entire shtick is like all that sustain and healing. But honestly, kind of playable in some situations. ORISA, she's pretty decent. B tier. I think she's an absolutely decent choice, an absolute tank bully in the right matchups, right? She's an absolute wall. Like, even with the DPS passive, she has great damage mitigation tools by simply cycling her abilities, and is really good at bullying things like ROADHOG and some Doom players. Like, she's pretty decent. Now, RAMATTRA, a little bit better, B+ in the good tier. Good choice, right? And he's even better in coordinated pro play environments where teams actually utilize his blocks and his annihilation to stall for space while also going all in at the right times. But this tier list is for ranked, and I feel like Ram is just so good at punishing ranked mistakes with that Nemesis form chase down while simultaneously being hard to kill if you cycle like your shield and your forms correctly. It's just a great brawl rush choice, so B+ for sure. Now, REINHARDT, definitely a D tier. I just think he's so hard to win with on this patch. You have to jump through so many hoops and obstacles and hurdles to even have a enjoyable experience. Like, there's so many counters, soft counters, but when you have like 3, 4, 5 of them, they all compound with each other, and honestly just doesn't bode well for Rein players. Like, his brawl or like rush archetype has better options if you do want to go that route. You can either just pick Ram, JUNKRAT, Orisa, or even Zarya, and those heroes find value in easier ways at this level of play. He's probably like solid B tier in the metal ranks, but quite literally I've seen like 3 Rein matches in the last 400 games, but he is sort of serviceable in the very, very right conditions. He's hard to win. Doesn't mean it's unwinnable, but it's very hard to win. ROADHOG was an easy D tier for me last patch, but the hotfix patch did buff his survivability, so he's a little more durable. And honestly, I'd actually bump him up to C tier right now because there's so many DOOMFIST players, right? You know, and your job as ROADHOG and that little niche, right? Because this is a C tier niche. The niche is to just make the Doomsday miserable. Now, with the HP buffs this patch, it's impossible to 100 to 0 one-shot combo someone with just like a raw hook, right? There's so much setup required with the pick pen, a little bit of poke before they're in range to be fully punished. So again, the high frequency of DOOMFISTs, lower frequency of Zens and Anas this patch, with most teams actually going for Lucio and Moira, it actually makes ROADHOG kind of like a wall in a sense, right? You're not actually dying as often as you think with some of the meta picks. But that being said, if they do pick some of the counters, you probably have to get off the hero. Sigma, I'd say Sigma is just consistently one of the most resistant to counter swaps, as he's just always, you know, a solid versatile poke tank who's great at everything, right? Except mobility, I guess. Not much to say here, just like a safe A tier hero. He's just very good. Now, Winston, I'd still say Winston's pretty good. He's probably in the B+ category. I do honestly think DOOMFIST is better as your primary dive tank in this meta. Perhaps the Asian regions like Korea still opt for Winston, as that's historically been the case. But now, one of the reasons I do assume he's being played less is because Ana is harder to play this season, and if your friendly Ana is getting marked and DPS debuffed by that Tracer, it's going to be a nightmare for her to build Nano, and if the Ana is struggling, Winston will lag behind some of the other offensive options, so yeah. Now, Wrecking Ball was the S tier pick before the hotfix patch when teams were running Ball, Zen, Lucio, Tracer plus 1 flex, maybe like a Sombra, Genji, or Echo. But with Zen getting that HP nerf, playing with Zen may require a Brig again. And while the Brig Zen backline isn't terrible, I just think Lucio is too good to pass up on this patch. So in ranked play, you really just need that good ball player who has practice to shine in. Like, he did receive 75 armor. I would say he's A tier, right? He's still like a very good dive option. He is very much unkillable. Again, benefited from that 75 armor buff. The projectile size changes didn't really hurt him since he's rolling around anyways and never really gets headshot, right? Because his head is tucked in. And good players at this level weren't going to miss his giant ball hitbox anyways, right? You can also disengage and pick up health packs, which is a big part of his gameplay loop. Engage, disengage, roll for health packs. And health packs are unaffected by that DPS passive. So that all indirectly makes him a great dive tank option, better than Winston in my opinion, and kind of on par with DOOMFIST. Probably DOOMFIST a little better right now, but if you're a sweaty ball player, I mean, you're eating well this patch too. All right, Zarya. I think Zarya's pretty decent right now. The damage buffs this hotfix patch turned him from that niche C tier hero to a ranked monster if left unchecked. Honestly, B+ or B, really depends. I'm kind of tossed up in between. She can absolutely get run over by good coordinated teams who like count her bubbles and rush her down, or if she wastes them on some stupid teammates in ranked. So go either way. Maybe for the sake of keeping it clean, we'll put her in B as decent, kind of like on par with Orisa if we're thinking Brawl, but I think RAMATTRA and Queen are favored in comparison to these ground-based tanks. So yeah. All right, moving on to DPS, we have Ashe, A tier, very, very good. She's a great mid-range hit scan with those projectile buffs. And that Dynamite applies that 20% healing reduction DPS passive for 7 seconds, right? Because it's 5 seconds for the Dynamite burn, and then once the burn is over, there's 2 seconds afterwards that it applies for, so 7 seconds. Bob is also a great tempo ultimate, which can also apply that DPS passive. And obviously, if you're an Ashe player, your shots are like the size of Jupiter's, so just reaping the benefits of locking her in. She's honestly just A tier. Bastion. I think Bastion is still great if there are resources for him, so he can melt down enemy Winstons or whoever walks in his crosshair. But that being said, since the other hit scans are so much more reliable right now, it's a question of why play Bastion if you're going to land most of your shots anyways on Ashe or Cass or Soldier. You know what I'm saying? So for that reason, C tier. Pretty niche. All right, Cassidy has risen up to A tier this season. I think he's found his role in his niche, right? Everything is a lot scrappier and up close this patch, especially with all this JUNKRAT rush. And Cass is great at slowing her down and can hinder her ultimate completely. And all the Tracers running around, of course, right? And, you know, Cass is a real threat to force her out. In addition, we also have all the DOOMFIST players and the ball players who do have to get up close to create value. And walking straight into Cassidy's no-no zone, you know, it's a little scary for them, right? He's an absolute tank at 275 HP. And he does have that damage reduction roll, which allows him to tank pulse bombs. Right, so he's absolutely lethal at the effective ranges this season, and he's an answer to all the popular meta heroes, so A tier. Echo, also A tier, really, really good if you're, you know, good at her. It's just hard to find players who are good at her in your average ranked lobby, but if you do find a good Echo player, she is slotted alongside Tracer, and you can absolutely go to town with her in dive comp. She can play pretty safely in the sky, poke with her tri-shots and stickies, which also did receive that projectile size increase, right? And you can see her prevalence right now in the OWCS as a very, very strong option, especially in Korea. Okay, Genji's also another DPS hero going crazy this season in A tier. I was convinced Genji mains were right at the beginning when they're like, oh my god, Genji's dead, right? Oh my god, they're not buffing Genji. He's gonna be so bad. Everyone has so much HP. He's never gonna get dash resets, blah, blah, blah. But boy, was everybody wrong. The projectile size changes to his shurikens actually did wonders to him, because if you get up close now, you're not missing those secondary fires like ever. Those like shurikens are humongous, and you're absolutely going to shred people down with back-to-back right clicks or secondary fires. And he's honestly such a great dive option to clean up this patch. The Dragon Blade swing speed buff is actually surprisingly good at cleaning up as well. You don't need the nano, and it's honestly not bad. Just don't go in 1v5 and complain, because if you're going in 1v5 and dying because they're using every cooldown on you, that's a you issue. That's a skill issue. Genji's really good this patch. Originally I had Hanzo in decent, but I think the more I think about it, I just feel like the sniper archetype, like with Widow in comparison, you'd rather just play Widow in most scenarios, right? So Hanzo just feels niche to me now, right? He's playable maybe like Circuit Royale or Junkertown if you want to pair double sniper, but other than that, you'd much rather opt in for other reliable hit scans, right? He gets dove very easily by Doom and Ball, and Hanzo lost his one shot. He no longer has a one-shot. The headshot only does 240 damage right now, which is not enough to kill all the buff 250 HP heroes. So Hanzo players have to rely on chucking those logs of his into the bodies of the enemies, a lot of body shots. But this recent hotfix patch actually nerfed his logs, and the relative power of him was reduced. The projectile size got nerfed, sorry, this patch. So when you compare that to the other DPS heroes that do a similar job, it just feels like he's just the niche option, right? He is just C tier. Now Junkrat. D, easy. The hotfix patch that recently came that buffed him, I'm not convinced this hero is good still, right? The spammy style at chokes playstyle may work in bronze or silver, but as you gradually move up, like no one falls for it anymore. And you literally have to hit 3 spam shots in a row to even kill someone, with the condition or the stipulation that they don't receive any healing in between, which is very rare. If you get hit by a junk shot, you're probably gonna back up and ask for healing. If you get hit by 3 from a choke, that's on you. So if Junkrat can't spam chokes, his next best playstyle that has worked well for him in high ranks for many years is that sneaky flank rat style with that one-shot combo threat with that quick primary fire into concussion mine. But now this combo is dead unless they've taken a bit of chip damage beforehand, and you have to hit 2 shots in a mine or go crazy with like a shot mine and a follow-up shot in the distance, which looks like a crazy cool clip if you pull it off, but let's be real, how consistently can you actually do that? I just don't think Junkrat's very good. He's so hard to win with. He's D tier. Now Mei is decent, sitting in the middle at B tier. She's picked randomly in your ranked game. She's a tier up actually if played in the right conditions, such as RAMATTRA Rush, but you know, B tier. She's very durable at 300 HP. She's got that ice block and icicles that chunk enemies, since the size of those things got buffed as well. So she's pretty decent at poke, and obviously if you get up close, freeze them, annoy them. Pretty decent hero. Okay, PHARAH. I'm actually convinced she's a dark horse. Like, she could arguably be quite decent or even good in the right hands, but it's still too early in this rework. It's only been 3 weeks, right? I've certainly seen some PHARAHs dominate as she's very spammy now, but at the same time, I literally witnessed a Pharmacy in the top 500 game I played. They fell off the map on Numbani Frisk because the PHARAH accidentally ran out of fuel, the Mercy had no one to fly to. Like, that new fuel is quite limiting and is incredibly punishing if it's not managed well. And this will still take time, right? You have people with thousands of hours of having to unlearn the old fuel management habits, so it's honestly kind of tough. So for now, I think she's incredibly niche. Not certainly bad, but I think the rework was a step in the right direction, and she's probably like a small buff to her fuel away from being pretty good. Reaper in a vacuum is actually quite decent. He's solid in this patch because he's a durable, 300 HP. He applies that DPS passive quite easily without those shotgun pellets, and he lifesteals back, so he can absolutely duel people and burst down tanks. He's not really as strong like flanking people, you just be a tank buster, right? So he is picked quite a bit in pro play as an option in rush comps. The only issue I find with Reaper is that he's so boring and one-dimensional, so you just don't see very many of them in rank. That doesn't mean he's bad. He's actually quite decent. B tier. Now, SOJOURN, I originally had her in A, but I think B+ is actually a good place to put her. Like, it doesn't mean she's like bad, she's still good, right? The projectile size changes certainly benefited her in a lot of ways. Buffed her in like 3 ways, actually. Like, first, those SMG projectiles, they got bigger, and the bigger projectiles means you land them more, which means faster rail charge. And then because you build faster rail charge, you fire that rail shot more often. That rail shot is also easier to hit because it's a hit scan. So a lot of things that do help SOJOURN out. Now, the reason why I put her in B+ is because I think heroes that do a similar job to her are a little bit more reliable, like true hit scans versus having to rely on the projectiles to build up and rail. It takes a little bit of time, and in some matchups, it can be a little bit more difficult, like against a JUNKERQUEEN who's strafing back and forth and running at you. All in all, it's more of like a reliability thing averaged out. So like you certainly A plus against certain tank matchups, but maybe a slot down in some other unfavorable ones. Okay, Soldier 76, very, very good. He's just so reliable on this patch with those projectile size buffs, with the hit scans, like easy A tier. He does a bit of everything. He constantly applies that DPS passive, peppers people's down, has self-sustain, and can sprint and set up on so many different off angles that can be very problematic if he isn't dealt with. Now, I think Sombra is a solid choice in B+. Like, she's an annoying flank DPS that can be absolutely dominant if left unchecked. She's honestly actually A tier in a proper Doom or Ball dive setup with Tracer, but as a standalone pick, I think she's like B or B+, right? If she is extremely vulnerable. If she's caught out and spy checked, she's pretty much dead in the hands of a good team. I did this in the OWCS recently. I know it's not ranked play, but the idea is there where we're literally looking for the Sombra, and as soon as we find her, she's cooked. Like so.
Yep.
Sombra, don't chance again. Sombra, don't chance again. Symmetra just isn't great this season and is honestly D tier. Her role right now seems to be just to TP out of spawn on control maps, and that's it. And you swap the Tracer. Like, I've seen 2 Symmetra players in the last 400 games, and those are just Symmetra 1 tricks. And honestly, it's probably because he just gets run over, right? It's hard to stay alive long enough in range to beam someone down, since it takes like 3 seconds to build up your beam damage. Since Lucio is being run on almost every team, they can basically speed away and then boop you away to create that distance, so you can't beam them down. Symmetra's secondary fire, while very large, is just free ult charge for the enemy, since you can't 2-tap someone back to back. They'll likely be healed after getting hit a second time at this point, instead of like an old random cheese poke kill you would get in the previous seasons, but now it's too hard. TORBJORN, B+. While Torb isn't played much at the pro level, I think he's actually a ranked demon. I really think he's good, especially if you can't play Tracer like me. If I play DPS and I suck at Tracer, I'll just play Torb. And don't feel bad about not being able to play Tracer. She's actually hard to play. But simply just put the turret down and let the game play itself for you. This turret can basically soft mark the Tracer the whole time in the backline and constantly apply the DPS passive to her and to anybody who walks in line of sight of it. Torb is also incredibly tanky. He goes to like 400 HP if he presses overload. Like, damn, bro. All right, Tracer is our first entry into the S tier, an absolute must pick every game if you can play her, of course. There's no other hero that can pressure off angles and attack from so many different places like her. A 25 HP buff, putting her at 175 HP now, is enough to help her survive some damage breakpoints in some rough matchups like Ana and some things. Her pulse pistols are so much more reliable to hit with those projectile size buffs. She's just an absolute demon in the right hands. Absolute demon. So pick her every game if you can. So what's interesting about Widow is that I noticed that nobody was running her in the OWCS I just played this past weekend, partly due to good players knowing how to dive and jump her. But that being said, this tier list is for ranked play, and boy oh boy do I hate Widowmaker players in ranked play, because they can literally control the game. The hit scan projectile buffs apparently increased her accuracy by more than like 10%, according to Alec Dawson, the lead hero designer, when he interviewed ML7 2 weeks ago at Blizzard. It was so bad that they did recently tune down the size of the projectile in the recent hotfix patch, but honestly, Widow players who've been playing the hero for like 8 years are still playing a net buffed version of this projectile size. So, and it's also the only true natural one-shot in the game, so it's player dependent, but like I just feel like Widow is just very good in ranked solo queue play. Like if you're just a dominant Widow, it's GG's, man. You win. You win. DPS patch, man. You win. All right, Ana. I'm an Ana main, and my poor grandma is suffering this season, and for many reasons, but I'll list out 3. First, you lost your offensive 3-shot, right? You now need 4 shots with all the HP buffs. The second reason is the DPS passive absolutely crushing Ana's sustain. If you get tagged by a DPS like Tracer, your self-nade only does like 48 HP healing now, like less than 20% of your total health. It's actually abysmal. And speaking of Tracer, if you do sleep her, you can no longer hit the breakpoint where you shoot nade melee to kill her. She does end up living if you do sleep her at full health, making this flank duel an absolute nightmare to deal with. Tracer's gonna eat you alive. And on the topic of flanks, the third reason is, dive. You're just gonna fall apart as Ana to not only Tracer, but a random Genji, Sombra, DOOMFIST jumping you. It's just too much if Tracer has supporting cast, right? So the high level meta is to play high survivability heroes like Lucio plus Moira or Kiri or Baptiste. Ana is just hard in C tier, right? If they don't run it, if they're not running dive or no tracer, then yeah, sure, Ana is, you know, playable, but at that point, it's niche, right? If they don't have the meta pick, then yeah, it's playable, but other than that, too hard, man. She's C tier for the first time, like, ever. All right, Baptiste is good. Arguably very good if you're just a machine at, like, mowing people down. He offers fantastic offensive pressure and is, of course, hard to kill since he does have that regen burst and lamp, which are very good tools to help mitigate some of those things. But that being said, I mentioned survivability is key to this meta, and there will be times Bap will get overwhelmed by the enemy who just rush into him and just can't even keep up with both of those cooldowns. So I've actually seen some teams swap to Bap, swap off the Bap for Moira or Kiriko, who do a similar job but stay alive a lot better. Brig, honestly pretty good in my opinion. Maybe at B+. Honestly a great solo queue answer to all the ball players, Doom players, Tracer players. Brig can peel them off and is never like a terrible slot in choice since one of those three heroes is in every game at this level. But that being said, most games players are opting for Lucio first, and if Lucio is a priority pick, there's no need for Brig. If you have the Lucio, you just slot in a higher value flex support that synergizes with them a bit better. Like Baptiste or Kiri or Moira, and you run with that. I actually do feel like Brig would get more playtime and become more meta if Ana or Zen were stronger in this patch and Lucio was a little bit weaker, since Brig's role is more defined when you're actually protecting those two vulnerable supports. Illari's so hard to win with on this patch and is in D tier. Her identity is to DPS hard on like an off angle, and prior to Season 9 she could 2-shot people, but now it requires 3 shots and even more if you don't like refill your charge to full and they don't receive any sliver of healing. So that offensive pressure is kind of lagging behind relative to the rest of the hero cast. So the question is, how's her healing? Well, the pylon doesn't really heal much anymore. It's like 30 HP a pump. It used to be 40 HP, now it's 30. And then there's that DPS passive, so really it's like 24 HP. So single target healing for her beam is still pretty decent though, but that requires Illari to be up close to like the tank if she's pocketing and topping off the tank. But if the enemy team sees an Illari close to the tank, well, Lucio's in every game, right? So you just speed onto them and then you kill the Illari. And at this level, that makes Illari really hard to play. Now for Kiri, I was convinced she wasn't great on this patch because she lost her 2-tap potential with all the HP pool buffs, but when looking at the grand scheme of things, so did everyone else, right? The relative burst power of the entire roster went down, so she wasn't alone there, so she doesn't lag behind in that capacity. You know what I'm saying? Because it's all relative. So she is still able to 2-tap Tracer though, who is one of her biggest threats, so if that's still a thing, then and she's meta, we have ourselves a great A tier support hero who synergizes very well with Lucio and works in, you know, dive, rush, and even some poke comps in some cases. So very good hero right now. Kiriko is A tier. Lifeweaver suffers similarly to Illari in this meta. They're hard to win with because their identity is just lost in this meta. He's effectively just a hard heal bot, but heal botting is a little tougher with that DPS passive slowing down its potency. And while Lifeweaver can certainly play make, it's so risky to go for some cheeky offensive platform grip play, so you're kind of stuck in this waiting game loop of pocketing someone until someone else does something. It's hard to be very proactive with him. Now one thing I will say is that his Thorn Volley isn't actually that weak against immobile heroes, or rather immobile objects like Sigma's shield. I do think it's one of the fastest shield break times in the game since all those thorns will hit. But, you know, that aside, Lifeweaver obviously runs into trouble thorn volleying mobile heroes with a lot of quickness and slipperiness, like all the Lucios, the Kiris, the Moiras, the Tracers. So at this point, you're kind of just fighting for your life here. If you get jumped by one of these slippery heroes, you have to pedal up and you have to just pocket and fight back a little bit, and then you're not healing. And I don't know, I just don't think he's very good. He's just so hard to win with. So D tier. Lucio, I mentioned him a lot in this tier list. Finally, we get to him. He's the only other S tier on this patch. He's unbelievable, right? The projectile size buffs allow him to spam his green Oreos and just consistently tag enemies and farm insane amounts of damage. These Lucio players on my team are getting like 5, 7, 9, 10k damage when I have like 4k damage on Kiri. I'm like, how the heck are you farming so much damage? But they just spam down a choke and they get so much chip damage and faster, and all that chip damage translates to faster sound barriers. That's a big deal. It's a big, strong ultimate, right? So tagging enemies, was a big thing. And they also buffed his boop like crazy. Like, it's actually so strong with that movement lockout. It's basically like a stun on a very short cooldown. Like, what's boop's cooldown? 4 seconds? A 4-second stun. So watch this clip of Emong getting booped off here on King's Row. When he got booped, that 0.45 second movement lockout locked Emong in the opposite vector of his movement, and that forward momentum of his ultimate, the Rampage, caused him to fall off the map, which is absolute insanity. What else does Lucio do well at? He's great at peeling, chip damage, the 250 HP actually, for the whole hero cast, means more to Lucio because even if he gets focused a bit, he can actually wall ride around a corner and stay alive if he can break line of sight and then top himself back off. His survivability just went off the charts with that, and he works everywhere, like dive, brawl, rush, and even poke. Teams just even run Sigma with Lucio, since Lucio can poke with how well his green Oreos are just, you know, hitting across the map, right? And you can speed in and out the Sigma as well in poke. But anyways, just play Lucio with brawl or dive, and you're guaranteed to like pop the fuck off. So Lucio, meta. Mercy, believe it or not, I think she's actually better than ILLARI and LifeWeaver. Probably a solid niche but playable option in C tier. Like, there's so many great DPS options we mentioned earlier, right? You can pocket the Ashe, you can pocket the Cass or the Sojourn, right? I low-key think she's better than people give her credit for. And while yes, like pocket healing someone isn't great, it's pretty awful at 55 HPS plus that 20% DPS passive, which puts it at what, 44 HPS. But damage boosting an Ashe can still help with the break points, since damage boost is a percentage-based modifier, and percentage-based means more in this, you know, all the HP going up. It's great when you damage boost a Sojourn or an Ashe. And yeah. Another thing is that res is actually inherently more valuable too, since you're resing a higher HP target who doesn't get blown up as quickly on this patch, since they're also healthier, like they, you know, when compared to other seasons. So yeah, I think Mercy is actually, you know, niche. Okay. Serviceable in the right hands. MOIRA. Can't believe I'm saying this, but MOIRA is actually A tier in high elo. She can AoE heal reliably in a clump to help offset some of that individual DPS passive. She has incredible survivability, coalescence. Her ultimate is a great tempo ability. Her damage on Biotic Grasp is surprisingly good because it did get buffed when compared to the relative changes in the HP pools. I think MOIRA's TTK remained the same because the damage went from 50 DPS to 65 DPS damage per second, which is the same when looking at the percentage increase in the health pools from 200 to 250. So with all that being said, continue slaying with MOIRA. She's the nails. Slay. Finally for Zen, he was the S tier meta pick before this hotfix patch recently, but a small nerf to his HP from 275 to 250 and a nerf to the snap kick knockback distance has toned him down a bit. I still think he's good in the B tier, but he's no longer a meta pick because he can actually fall apart now from a bit of coordinated dive. But it's all good though. In solo queues, Zen can absolutely still pop off. He's doing fine. Discord Orb is still very strong, right? The percentage based debuff, great in Season 9 with all the HP changes. Primary, secondary fire, projectile sizes are massive. Like, he's literally chucking planets at people. And a healing orb permanently on a friendly tracer is a nightmare for the enemy to deal with. So Zen's doing, he's good. He got toned down, but he's in a good spot, I think. And I think that is my Season 9 hotfix patch updated tier list for ranked play in higher elo. I didn't end up doing the dual split tier list this season. I had a lot of criticism saying I don't understand the game at a lower level, so they're kind of pointless because inevitably heroes that have a lower skill floor will end up doing better than others, which is true. So yeah, honestly, in most ranks, just play whatever you want. This is just an opinion, but I will say if you can play any of these top two heroes, you're good. And anybody else, it's whatever to me. That's it for my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Peace.